Our brains have long been programmed to think made in China equals cheap and unreliable. But what if I told you that same label now sits on some of the fastest growing electronics brands in the world? The TV on your wall, the fridge in your kitchen, even the air conditioner in your living room or above you, there is a good chance it's from a Chinese company. And these brands are not only catching up to the industry standards, they are setting a whole new one. Step out in the market today, and TCL can easily sell you a 98-inch television for only $2,000, while LG charges $25,000 for the same size. So how did these cheap knockoffs become global brands? The story is bigger and more surprising than you think. Back in the early 2000s, made in China was almost a joke. People thought it meant cheap, flimsy, and unreliable. You could buy a Chinese TV for half the price of a Samsung, but chances were the screen would glitch, the remote would stop working, or the warranty wouldn't save you. At that time, China was seen as the world's factory, making gadgets for big global brands, but its own names carried little respect. Take Xiaomi. In its early years, it was slammed for copying Apple. Phones like the Mi Note and Mi 4i looked almost identical to iPhones. It had the same curved edges, the same colors, even similar packaging. Critics mocked it as the Apple of China, but not in a good way. And when Xiaomi was caught using a 3D artist's work, originally made for LG, on their Spanish website, it only reinforced the idea that Chinese brands couldn't play fair. TCL had its own reputation problem. In 2006, The Economist published a piece called A Grim Picture and described TCL as a quiet assassin. At the time, the company was making modestly priced mid-tier TVs that weren't glamorous, but they were cheap enough to eat into the market share of Western giants. The quality couldn't hold up for long either. Dead pixels, faulty motherboards, and slow after-sales service gave the brand a bad name. Still, they were quietly chipping away at competitors who had been household names for decades. Hisense faced the same issue. Starting as a radio factory back in 1969, it grew into a TV giant. But customers in countries like India often complained about flickering panels and poor durability. The brand had a reputation for being accessible but not premium. And how can we not talk about Haier in its early days? Its appliances were so unreliable that founder Jiang Ruimin famously smashed 76 defective refrigerators with a sledgehammer in front of his workers to prove a point about quality. Even then, Haier had to market itself with German-style branding because people trusted made in Germany more than made in China. Huawei's challenge was different. While the products themselves worked fine, the brand was shadowed by suspicion. Governments in the US, UK, and Australia raised alarms about their close ties to the Chinese state, claiming its equipment could be used for spying. By 2019, Huawei had been banned from 5G networks in multiple countries, and Google even cut off Android updates for its phones. This created a global perception problem. Now, Huawei wasn't seen as cheap, but as untrustworthy. And in the world of technology, trust is everything. However, while the reputation was poor, the sales numbers began to tell a different story. By 2024, Hisense shipped 29 million TVs worldwide, grabbing 14% of the global market. Even more shocking, they led the massive screen category. Nearly 59% of all 100-inch TVs sold globally were Hisense. TCL wasn't far behind. By late 2024, it overtook LG in premium TVs, jumping from 12% to 20% market share in just 1 year. Xiaomi also exploded. In 2024, it shipped around 169 million smartphones, making it the world's third largest smartphone maker, right behind Apple and Samsung, with about 14% global market share. And Haier set a whole new standard in 2016. It bought GE appliances in the US, putting Chinese-made fridges and washing machines directly into American homes under a trusted local name. So yes, back then, made in China meant cheap knockoffs or, in Huawei's case, questionable trust. But these brands were already laying the foundation for something bigger. They were building at scale, cutting costs, and finding ways to grab market share. While the world laughed at their reputation, no one stopped long enough to notice they might just be preparing to become the next big story. If you look closely, Chinese companies didn't just happen to be successful. They ran a playbook that Western brands couldn't copy fast enough. The first move was vertical integration. While Samsung or Sony often relied on third-party suppliers for parts, Chinese brands started building their own factories for panels, chips, and assembly lines. TCL created its own display arm, CSOT, which now produces panels not only for TCL, but also for Samsung and Apple. By controlling every step of the supply chain, they could cut costs, react faster to demand, and scale up production like no one else. This is why TCL can sell a 75-inch TV for just $2,999, while LG's version ranges near six figures. The second weapon was aggressive pricing. Instead of playing the prestige game, they turned it on its head. Chinese companies realized that most consumers don't need perfection, they need value. So they made TVs, fridges, and phones that delivered good enough quality at unbeatable prices. In 2022, TCL grabbed 11.7% of the global TV market, ranking second only to Samsung. Hisense wasn't far behind, holding about 8% and even overtaking Sony in shipments. 10 years earlier, those numbers would have sounded impossible. Then came practical innovation. Instead of spending billions on wild futuristic concepts, Chinese brands focused on what consumers actually wanted. Hisense leaned into laser TVs. They created something big, energy efficient, and way cheaper than premium televisions. Haier zeroed in on smart, connected appliances for everyday families. Xiaomi turned its phones into entry gates for entire smart home ecosystems. Due to this, you could buy a Xiaomi phone, and you will likely end up with their speakers, bulbs, and air purifiers too. However, their brand strategy remained the same, offering features without breaking the bank. Marketing was the secret sauce. Instead of waiting decades to build a reputation, Hisense rallied its name across FIFA World Cup stadiums. Xiaomi turned shopping into an event with flash sales that sold out in minutes. Huawei, on the other hand, invested billions into its research and development. That was a $24.7 billion spending in 2024 alone, nearly 21% of its revenue, but it smartly used that investment to position itself as not just cheap, but something offering both features and affordability. The final piece of the playbook was a strong ambition to go global. Unlike older Chinese companies that only cared about domestic sales, this new wave thought worldwide from day one. TCL established itself in the US in 2013 and quickly surpassed LG in TV shipments. Haier went one step further, buying GE appliances in America to gain instant credibility. And this way, they took over both the audience and the market shares. Put together, the playbook is something that works exceptionally well in the long run. Build your own parts, sell at below market prices, innovate for everyday needs, and go global fast. And the result would shock you. In less than 2 decades, Made in China went from meaning cheap knockoff to meaning global dominance. And while Samsung and LG are still competing to hold the top spot, every new price comparison and market share report tells the same story. The playbook is working. Now, you might be thinking China's run to the top ended just like that. However, when you see it the way China does, you would see these brands slowly taking the power from the West and reserving it for China. When TCL and Hisense started selling massive screens at prices that no one else could match, companies like Samsung, LG, and Sony suddenly found themselves at a disadvantage. They could no longer compete on affordability, so many of them climbed up the ladder, focusing only on the ultra-premium market. That's why you now see TVs worth as much as a car. The middle-class buyer, once the backbone of their business, has long gone away into the arms of Chinese competitors. And this change is bigger than just the number of sales. It has changed what people around the world dream of owning. A decade ago, a giant smart TV or a fully connected fridge was something you would only imagine in a luxury apartment or in a showroom. Today, thanks to Chinese brands, these once luxury items are moving into regular homes. TCL can sell you a 98-inch television for the price of an iPhone, and Haier can fit out your kitchen with smart appliances without emptying your bank account. Suddenly, what was once a symbol of status is becoming an everyday reality. And once consumers get used to that, there's no going back. But the global impact doesn't stop at living rooms and kitchens. They are also a part of the political battlefield. Because China controls much of the supply chain. From rare earth minerals to display panels, it holds leverage in global trade. This basically means that the ongoing trade war is not limited to oil and steel. It is happening in the chips inside your phone, the panels in your laptop, the 5G tower in your city. That Hisense TV in your lounge may look like an entertainment device, but it's also a signal of how deeply China has settled itself into the everyday lives of millions worldwide. Of course, there is also an environmental twist. Making gadgets with features and price both has opened the floodgates of affordable tech, but it has also created mountains of waste. Cheaper phones, cheaper TVs, cheaper appliances, all of them replaced faster, discarded quicker. The e-waste problem is growing, and China's rise has only made it worse. Yet the irony is that the very same companies are also investing in eco-friendly solutions. Haier's energy-saving fridges, Hisense's low-power laser TVs, and TCL's experiments with greener panels show that they are both part of the problem and, strangely enough, trying to be part of the solution. And then there is the cultural impact, the soft power that gets in without anyone noticing. 10 years ago, no one thought Chinese brands would be featured as headline sponsors of the FIFA World Cup, but now billions watch their favorite matches with Hisense glowing in the background. It's advertising, sure, but it's also something much bigger. Every logo, every sponsorship, every billboard changes how people see China, not just as a country far away, but as a trusted part of their daily lives, as a phone in their pocket, a fridge in their kitchen, a TV in their living room. And that wraps up our take on how Made in China flipped from a warning label to a winning strategy. The living room is just the beginning. Phones, appliances, and even cars, Chinese brands are only growing. Stick around and subscribe, because the next chapter of this story might already be in your hands.